So this is a special meeting, we like a work session, 3 o'clock. Is that all I need to do to start the meeting? We don't, okay, perfect. I know Top's gone. He told me he's on a nice trip for a couple weeks here and there. So anyway, he's gonna try to listen, if it depends what time zone it is, so you guys know. And I really appreciate you spending this time going through this. So that's what I'll start it off with. And are you up? Thank you.
Hello, there it is. Good afternoon, City Council. Laura Gloria, City Administrator. We'll have a couple of different departments presenting, but I kind of want to provide you guys with a overall table of contents, if you will, so you know kind of what to expect with the presentation. So what we'll do is dive into a little of the history of how we got here, our past programs, our current programs, our funding, the background and the research that we've done to inform the proposed plan, as well as the proposed codes to support that plan. This is something that the mayor has really made his priority. You know, once he was elected into office, we really started gathering as the collective team to put together this plan. So for the last 6 months, we really have been engaging in educating ourselves, meeting with respective service providers in the community, meeting with other cities. Again, a big piece of education, meeting with other nonprofits involved in this work. And so, again, this plan is really a collective, comprehensive plan addressing or including all of those perspectives. Just real quick, as I mentioned, this has been a team approach. So over the last 6 months, we've been meeting with community development, parks, public works, police, legal, and the mayor. This is just a very high level of how each of those interact with the homelessness issue in our community. Everything from program administration to enforcement, operations, and of course, strategy and direction from the mayor's office. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started into the program, and I'd like to pass it off to our community development director, Glenn. Let me lower this for you. Let me click here. There we go.
Good afternoon, I'm Glenn DeVries, Community Development Director, and I'd like to talk a little bit about an overview of the two-city homeless program, some history and current activities, and just to start off with statistics from January on the point-in-time count. On any given night in Chelan and Douglas counties, there are about 482 people that are considered homeless. Let's see, where's the slide? Is this going to work? Oh, someone doing that for me? No? Okay. Let me see here. But we've got some good news through recent efforts of the two cities. We've actually brought the number of unsheltered in the two cities down to 45 individuals. Those are the final numbers that were worked out through the state. So that's significant progress. We started at 113 in 2022, down to 61 in 23, and now down to 45. Seasonally, that can fluctuate, and you may see more homeless individuals on the streets. And for example, one of our shelters is a nighttime only shelter. So there are a number of homeless either on the street or in day shelters like Lighthouse during the day. So those numbers do fluctuate, but we have made some progress as a program. Okay, it's not showing up on my screen, sorry. Let me see, I wanted to just show what our homeless response system is. We work really hard for our system not to be siloed from the overall system. We just have parts of the program, and we know that we can't be successful unless we're in partnership with the other providers. And so overall, the system is run by Chelan County for what's called a consortium of care, or a homeless response system. And it's a community-based approach. It's leveraging private and public funding. And then the beginning of that process is meeting the homeless individuals in the field with outreach teams. There are 3 different outreach teams. There's specialists who focus on veterans. which is contracted with Hope Source. There are specialists who look at behavioral health and mental health and others as well through Catholic Charities. And then we have 2 outreach workers that are funded by city dollars. And those outreach teams meet homeless individuals in the field, and that's the start of a relationship. And we work to try to do a number of things, try to divert those folks out of homelessness through diversion dollars. Sometimes a plan can be simply going to family and getting them a ticket to go to family elsewhere, or at least get into a low barrier shelter, which we have now, and then begin to work with individuals on wraparound services, get them signed up for coordinated entry. Coordinated entry is a system, it's the porthole to access housing, and that's administered through the county, and then there are a variety of housing types that can be provided to unsheltered individuals. So it's an overall system, and we're just a part of that system. Coordinated entry is something that comes up. You might have seen it in the newspaper. The county administers that. It's been around since 2014 when the city started it. It wasn't a city idea, it was a state and federal requirement, and it's the overall system. Again, it's the portal to access housing vouchers and housing services. And historically that began with a variety of providers doing that service, then Catholic Charities. When the county took over, it then went to Hope Source and the Wenatchee Rescue Mission. The county is actually taking that service over with their own employees starting in July. But that's the portal to access housing vouchers. So what's the role of Chelan County? Chelan County manages grant funds for Chelan and Douglas counties. They have 2 full-time people that do that. They have approximately $3.1 million, work with 11 agencies, and have 15 programs. They manage their own task force, the Chelan Douglas Task Force, which we participate in as well. And they have manage a homeless advisory group, which is a broad-based group of all private and public providers, and it's a great meeting to share resources and information. Again, they oversee the coordinated entry system and the point in time count. They actually partner with us on that because we have the GIS system. City Wenatchee. So the city entered into an interlocal agreement with East Wenatchee in October 2021. We manage the funds on behalf of the 2 cities. We have a homeless consultant that works with us quarter time, which will probably not be available at the end of this year. And then I apply my time to it as well for that management. We have about $2.34 million annually that we receive from 3 different funds. We contract with 4 different agencies and focus on outreach, diversion, hotel vouchers, and permanent supportive housing and low barrier shelters. And we've also been providing capital oversight for the 2 safe parks, which are done with except for 1 community building. It's just an overhead shelter that we were required to do to make it a low barrier shelter by the state. And then we're just about done with our 43 pallet shelters. If you've had a chance to visit it, it looks really good. We're just waiting on power extensions so the shower trailer can be hooked up, and then a power to the lift station and new pumps for the lift station. We hope to be operational by the end of July for those units. We also administer the Columbia River Homeless Task Force and Program, the shelter network meetings, and coordinate in regional meetings for the homeless programs. Just a little bit of a timeline where we've been and where we're headed. In 2009, the city of Wenatchee agreed to administer the programs valley-wide for Chelan Douglas homeless programs. We did that until 2021. But in 2019 through 2020, we worked with partners and really studied what a low barrier shelter system was, how to administer it, and then also where could we get the funds for it. And what we found is we couldn't access the funds. Then a tool became available that I'll talk about. And in 2021, we broke out of we withdrew as the administrator of the Chelan Douglas program. and took our 100,000 of our recording fee dollars, our share as a city. And then in 2021, the two cities enacted a local tax, the 1/10 of 1% through House Bill 1590 amended by 1070 affordable housing sales tax, and that allowed us to fund our program for looking at the making progress on the unsheltered homeless population through our two-city program. The Columbia River Homeless Task Force was set up in 2021. A lot of discussion what a low barrier program is. It doesn't mean there aren't any rules. The rules are more behavior based. And the idea is that project participation is based on expectations rather than rule based. There's not a mandate for certain progress. It was really focused on the chronic homeless population, a way to reach them and starting to make some progress, because individuals who are experiencing chronic homelessness aren't a good fit for a high barrier rule system. And that was the gap that we were facing. So we entered into this interlocal agreement in 21, provides a framework for the administration of the funds for both cities, commitment to joint planning for policies and direction. It established the task force for the two cities, provided that the city of Wenatchee was the lead entity for these programs. And here's the list of things that we're supposed to do: contract development, management and performance monitoring, fiscal oversight, contract procedures and policies, meeting coordination and regional participation in the homeless system, the continuum of care, communication and education efforts, new program plan and policy development, data collection and reporting, system collaboration and partnership development for wraparound services, and providing, we are responsible to provide the staffing as the lead entity, but it's allowed to pull that money from the local tax by agreement. So what are the three funding sources? I spoke to one, the affordable housing sales tax. That's our primary, pulling in about $2.2 million a year for that. The focus has to be for homeless individuals and families, 60% for new beds. Other can be homeless services, also can be for behavioral health, veterans or DV survivors. Obviously the primary focus for us are homeless. We have two other, House Bill 1406, which is roughly $94,000. That's a really good fit for permanent supportive housing, and we use that to help fund two permanent supportive housing providers. And then we get a small amount for document recording fees, $100,000, which can be used for homeless services. So those are the three funds that the city receives. Our funded programs are these. We have, through the rescue mission, we fund a congregate bed facility, meaning it's a bunk bed facility. 65 beds, two safe parks, which are 51 spaces. Those are actually low barrier shelters, one of the few in the state. We were some of the first. Homeless street outreach program, and then we'll have our pallet shelter community open this summer. With the People's Foundation, we fund the operations for nighttime drop-in shelter, which is 50 beds. We have two permanent supportive housing facilities, which we support the operations. That's Miller Park and New Bridges with the YWCA and the Women's Resource Center. And then we have the landlord-tenant liaison program, which we support the operations for, that helps build relationships with landlords when they receive housing vouchers and placing folks with those landlords. And then the last part of what we fund are oriented to hotel vouchers and diversion funds. We use a lot of hotel vouchers for women and children until they're placed because we don't have a lot of facilities for women and children. And those work out great in partnership, say, with the Catholic Charities. And then we also do diversion funds, that plan where we can help someone exit homelessness quickly once they have a plan in place. Those are really successful with our shelters, and then also a partnership with Catholic Charities. Accomplishments, we have the two safe parks open and operational, 51 spaces. We have our pallet shelter units, the 43 units, which should be operational soon. We have an active outreach program which partners with law enforcement and wraparound service providers, and we're continuing to work on those relationships to make it more successful. We've established a shelter outreach network group, which we're continuing to work on, and I'll talk a little bit more about. We have something I'm going to show you. It's called a shelter vacancy tracker that we just started the last couple weeks, so that law enforcement and the shelters can look at and see what's available on a day-to-day basis as far as low barrier shelter space. We have worked closely with the county in a variety of efforts and other partners. Again, we don't want to be siloed. We want to be effective, and we want to be partners. We're developing an outreach program through our GIS platform, which will help look at data collection and performance tracking as outreach teams go out in the field to be more effective. We hope to have that operational within a month. We've been working with the outreach teams on that and our GIS system. And then we're working as a community with the East Wenatchee and then the county, also looking at how we can coordinate our planning for 5-year planning, and then also our comprehensive plans with respect to homeless. I think I went too far. There we go. This is that shelter tracker I mentioned. So on a day-to-day basis, after 5 p.m., you can go, the shelters and law enforcement can go in and see what's available. And the next morning, there is a lag in time. It's not in real time, so they have to call. But for example, on shelters, each shelter is different. Some shelters don't take sex offenders. Some shelters are not good for ADA. And so as the shelters encounter folks with different needs, they can communicate to each other and find the best fit. And then law enforcement, they're the only folks out there at night. A lot of times they're able to take folks to shelters as well. So this tracker is really effective for it. We do monitoring for our programs, as was previously mentioned, that ensures contract compliance, opportunity for education, training, and communication between our contractors and the city. It's an ongoing process. We look at a variety of things when we do that. Our contract terms, we have contract housing guidelines, we do orientation meetings, we put a monitoring plan together, we do risk assessments looking at the complexity of the program. We have a certain frequency and schedule we do that. A lot of them we do on-site monitoring. And then we're looking at formalizing a process to do checklists and weekly meetings for some programs in the field. And these, we look at outcomes and performance monitoring. That's an ongoing process, and we're going to be updating our contracts, looking at the metrics and see how we did and seeing what new metrics are available. So that's part of the process as well. And then as we do this monitoring, we have follow-up meetings with the providers. This is just an example of a contract monitoring schedule that we have. We've actually updated it for the rest of the year. If you'll see the risk assessment along the top, someone with a high score doesn't mean they're doing a poor job. That means their program's more complicated, it's larger, it's newer, and so we have more visits to them. We set performance targets again. We look at, and that's how we monitor them. We use best management practices. We look at acceptable progress outcomes. That can vary by program. When we have a new program, though, we don't have a lot of a benchmark. And so what we'll do, if you look at the next slide here, along the upper right-hand side, it says acceptable progress, and you see those are the emergency shelters. Well, we don't have a lot of data on those yet. So what we're going to do is, as we do our new contracts, we're going to say, okay, these are measures we can now use to measure you by how you've done and how we can look for continued improvement, and how do we measure that, and what are ways we can do better in the future. But now that we have a baseline, we can do that. There are a variety of things we can measure by. There's best management practices that are recognized, but there's also community choices. You can look at the length of stay, vacancy rates, costs. For the pallet shelters, we're going to be looking at a 90-day stay perhaps, And then if there's no progress, maybe those folks go to our congregate care beds and we bring someone else in who might make more progress in that shelter. So there's a lot of community choice when it comes to performance targets, and that's something that we'll be looking at with a contract update, which are all our contracts come due at the end of this year. And then lastly, we do a lot of coordination work and collaboration. One of the things I mentioned was this Shelter Outreach Network group. The whole concept there is that we have a variety of shelter providers. Each meets different needs, and we try to meet together and talk about resource sharing, problem solving sessions, brainstorming, and client conferencing. So for example, there were provisions in place, trespassing individuals. People didn't know how they could do that effectively, and some groups were doing a 5-year trespass. Well, that doesn't work well when you're working with homeless clients, and so we brought in one of the captains and did some training on how you can do sort of progressive trespassing. So maybe it's just one night and they get a warning, and maybe if it's something more severe, it's a week, and it progresses depending what it is. The whole idea is you want, at any given night, these individuals may need a warning, or and then be given another chance so that you can work on stabilizing them and getting them out of their point of crisis. So again, we work closely with the county and our other providers. We're working with wraparound service providers and continuing to try to build those relationships, because just housing people in a shelter isn't a solution in and of itself. You have to have wraparound services. You have to have those partnerships so you can make progress. Happy to answer any questions. That's just sort of a quick 20,000 foot view.
Glenn, what was that first slide? Can you go back, that number?
The very first one?
Yeah, and I'm just curious if I read it wrong, or, sorry, making you go all the way through this.
Happy to do so. That one?
Yeah, so on any given night, that one,
one.
I think it's the one
So that's the total number
that are homeless,
of homeless, but here you can see
unsheltered.
341 of those are sheltered.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yeah. I just needed to see that.
What was that number at the beginning of 2023 after the count?
And let me read this here. In 2023, we were 61 as far as unsheltered for East Wenatchee and Wenatchee.
But total homeless individuals?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number here.
Okay.
But, it's, we've made some progress, and the numbers just came out from Commerce. They go through a process to eliminate duplicates and what have you. So the initial number we had was higher, but once they go through and verify and get accurate numbers, we just received this within the last week, and it was good news. Obviously, a lot more to be done.
So, Glenn, I'm going to ask a tough question, because I know, we've had some of these, the homeless outreach, the wraparound services, the coordinated inventory. We've worked with these agencies for quite some time now. And obviously, Chelan County feels they're not getting their money's worth, and that's why they're trying to hire employees and do it themselves. And I'm kind of curious about your feelings or our feelings on what they've done, and are we going the right direction by using some of these same agencies?
Yeah, so the county chose, I'll try to answer this, and please tell me if I'm not answering what you're asking. So the county decided to go with their own employees for coordinated entry. Previously had gone through a number of different agencies, as I listed. And they have a really sharp individual, Amber, who actually ran it through one of the previous agencies. So they have a lot of in-house expertise on doing it. So I have a high level of, I feel very comfortable that they're going to be running this coordinated entry system, and they'll have 3 individuals to do that. So I think it'll be a good thing.
And then will we be using the counties?
Yes,
For the
and so
coordinated-
county runs, heads up the consortium of care, the homeless system. Just like when we ran it, we headed that up too. And so coordinated entry is required in order to get that state and federal funding.
I just
And
wanted to
so-
make sure we were still aligned and going the
Yep.
same direction as
Exactly.
a region.
And in fact, we actually require every contract we have to use coordinated entry. It's really important to align with the system and not be doing our own thing. We want people to engage with coordinated entry, to get on the list, to access services. So not that they're just housed in the shelter, but that they can get help, that they can get permanent housing that they need. And so we require providers to work with that county system.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions for Glenn on this piece?
So the next person will have a lot more questions for them. We're gonna save them up, it sounds like, Glenn.
Is
Good luck, Laura.
Anyone else warm? I'm hot. Everybody else hot? Hot in here.
It's just you.
Just you. Hot flashes. That's,
We can put in a request. Thank you, Aaron.
Bring it back down to reality, thank you.
Then I'm gonna freeze.
Oh, that's weird. Can't see that.
Hands are sweaty.
I'm great, but I'm always cold, so.
Aaron's working on it.
Okay. All right, so, as you guys just saw, Glenn just covered, am I moving here? Oh, here we go. Coming back to this kind of diagram, the reason I wanted to show this again was everything that Glenn just covered is only in community development. It's only the program administration and the funding side of the piece. All of that work that Glenn has done, really Glenn and Sandra on the part, as a part-time staff. As you can see, it's taken a lot of work for performance, for contracts, for policy. That is just one piece of all of the pieces of the city that touch that. Again, parks, public works, police, legal, and the mayor's office all have a connection to this initiative. So, what we really saw was kind of a gap in making sure that all of these pieces were working together. We started meeting as a group, like I said, 6 months ago to really start to ask those questions and figure out those gaps. But we also tried to look at, well, where are there other places that are doing something that might be a successful model, or what other models may work here? So Mayor Poyer met with the city of Auburn. Through our discussions and the many discussions that we had, we were kind of pointed to that city as a good model of what could be successful. And they have in-house staff. So they currently have one director and I believe 2 coordinators. But their in-house model is a self-funded model that has the wraparound homeless services. Where's my notes here? And the model focuses on in-the-field outreach, and that in-the-field outreach is responsive and constant, stopping the inflow, and so starting programs that are either diversion programs or working with other service providers to help people before they have, become homeless. Treating shelters as transitionary, that's something that we saw in other cities where they would build up temporary housing and then they would get filled up and then they didn't really have a place for them to go after that. And so this model has to be kind of part of the process, but then again, working with those other services providers who can provide that next step in getting those individuals to the next part of the process, which is the next bullet point, integrating essential services within the shelters. And then the last point, which is I think the the biggest part in the Auburn model is that the Auburn care it's not a linear, it's a circular, and I'll provide a little bit more context on that here in just a second. So just as a high example, for street outreach, that again is done in-house, on the left, and I hope that's showing up on your side on the left. So the services outreach where it says services accepted, that person goes into a shelter, they get direct services in the shelter, like helping them get set up for Social Security, unemployment benefits, whatever they might have access to, get them in coordinated entry, as Glenn mentioned, to get them into a housing pipeline, and then they exit into housing. The other side of that, though, is when there is street outreach and those services are declined, then they have a camping ordinance that's in place where the individual may be moved. If there's an opportunity there, to also move them into the housing nomination, that's done as well. So they sort of kind of take the different routes to get that person that obviously the final hope is to exit them into housing, but they take different paths depending on where that individual is. But these are the two paths. They have the services heavy side and the enforcement side that's necessary there in case someone, isn't willing at that point in time to accept services. I will point out that Auburn has very robust programs and a very robust budget. If you were to go look at their model, they have everything from a community court to return to work programs. We're not there, so I do want to kind of set some expectations as to what we're looking at here locally. That being said, I think that with the work that Glenn has done with the low barrier shelters and a lot of the services that we have here in the community, we have a very robust start and can get there. But that is the reason why one of the staff recommendations is hiring a full-time person to manage this program, not only to do the program administration that Glenn is currently taking on, in addition to his role as community development director, but to help continue to move all of those other programs and put them in place. So with that, I want to bring up Chief Crown to speak a little bit more to this, to the piece of having how important it is to have all of the pieces in place, and then it's not just it can't be, Councilmember Huffaker, to your comment, it can't just be us in one silo because it does not work that way. It has to be integrated with all of the different services, not just internally within the city, but with the service providers, with legal, with code enforcement, with all of that. So he is very passionate about this topic, so I will pass it off to Chief Crown.
Good afternoon, Steve Crown, your Chief of Police. So it's appropriate that we're on this slide. If you take a look at those two different models, you've got the street outreach where services are accepted and where services are declined. A lot of the folks that we deal with probably tend to be in that right category versus the left. But I will also say that there's not a tremendous list of services that you can provide to somebody that are mostly the very visible people that you see that are homeless. Service resistant folks that also have a tendency to cause additional calls for service for police. And that's always been the part of this discussion, right? 8 years ago, when I started kind of inserting myself into the homeless task force and a couple other iterations of that has happened over the years. It has always been about outreach. It has always been about how do you apply that positive or compassionate pressure to individuals and also have a place for them to go. That end group there where you've got to have decent facilities to send people. It's temporary. There's wraparound services. They're getting needs met, everything from mental health, substance use disorders, to actual medical issues that are going unaddressed with that individual. There's a portion of folks that I don't think that there's ever going to be a right-sized service for them. And that's where it becomes highly difficult for law enforcement. But outreach is intricately connected to what services are available out there. It's not only the initial temporary service, but it's the beyond that. If you have, I'll just use St. Jude's Landing. It's a large apartment complex used for low-income purposes. I assure you there are people that are inside that facility that were homeless. They're generally the low-hanging fruit with probably not as big of behavioral issues, although they have a fair amount of calls for services. They're doing a much better job these days of managing at their own level. But having that balance and what's next for the homeless? Because if you get them stabilized through that process of wraparound services and you get them temporary shelter, it's the what next that always becomes a big deal. How do you integrate them into existing services that are there and not warehouse people? There has to be an outflow to productive citizen and job-related skills being built, and wherever possible, they get on their own and be self-sufficient. But a portion of all of those resources that we put out have got to have that. It's not sustainable if you keep building those temporary shelters. As part of our approach strategies, the mayor, Laura, have pulled together all of our departments, and we deal with a lot of the issues that are super visible. Those ones that deal with a parked RV, those where there's encampments, and I'm sure we're going to get to more of the less visible issues at some point in time, because I think, again, you got to be thinking about that outflow of homelessness as well. I'm encouraged by the fact that we're talking about a homeless response administrator. I think that is still a little bit of a ball of clay that we're trying to shape. But those 3-4 things that you saw on the previous slide with the eviction intervention, we've got a pretty good process. Glenn talked about the landlord liaison process. In-field outreach, that's a key of that term. In-field, somebody that gets out of their desk, their brick and mortar, and are highly trained. The individual that has motivational coaching in their resume, the ability to sit down and talk with individuals and discover what is making them homeless. What are their barriers and how can we break through those barriers? If that type of positive, compassionate pressure does not occur, that is a major flaw to the outreach or whatever term you want to use. So that's huge for me. That's preventative as well as positive action. The integrated essential services. Stabilization is key to getting people to that next level, to get them to a point where they're making rational decisions about their own future, as well as not putting themselves in jeopardy while on our streets and making victims out of business owners and people that do business within our town. And quite frankly, it's the quality of life issues that are literally in our mission statement as a police department. The police department is a point in time. We spend sometimes upwards of 60 calls for service in a 12-hour period. And as you've heard just before this meeting, sirens going off, and that is your men and women going to work and dealing with the emergent issues. The problem that I've always seen for law enforcement is we are that point in time and not necessarily a long-term solution. We can't case manage anyone. We just don't have those resources to find out, one, what's their barriers, two, remove them, and then get them stabilized in some sort of facility. It's literally being able to go down through that list, who has beds. If you don't go, you're probably going to run into a law issue here. So I'm really supportive of this concept, so long as it has some of those key components. I think it's going to be a force multiplier for us. Any one person or persons that have the full list of services that are available in this valley, has built relationships with each one of those entities, knows what the point of contact is, and can get things done, is going to be a huge help to our city. I've invited Chief Johnson from over in East Wenatchee, because I think we try at every turn to be partners with East Wenatchee, because we know that we have just a simple river that goes between us. And our issues are their issues are our issues. And so happy to take any questions if you'd like. Okay, thank you.
So I am gonna steer off just for a second. So obviously Chief Crown's one more day, a couple more days, but what I was gonna say is he's buying into this, and he's been an intricate part in the police is just one tool, and maybe the last tool that's in our box that we're trying to create. And it's in the same token, it was in a weird way, as an honor. We're at River Common, he voted against me. And I think that just shows integrity, because, and he's done that a few times with me, twice? Has it been twice? So anyway, I appreciate
I don't
your.
get a third, right?
I appreciate, you don't get a third, you're out of here tomorrow. But I appreciate your working with us, and I know you gave up truthfully some vacations that you could have done during this last month to help us coordinate through the full 6 months. So that meant a lot to me, and I know you did that because this is your community. So thank you, Chief.
You're welcome, Mayor. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the support. I will say something too, is that in the last 3 years, these concepts, ideas have dug in deep hills into our police department. The roots are strong. They get these concepts. They know what they're limited by in terms of the grants passed, the Boise decision, Seattle v. Long. They're well abreast on those issues, but they're constantly figuring out ways to motivate people to next steps. And on the other end of the spectrum, how can we get you to where you're going to get more resources? And if that's out of town and there is a receptive family member on the other end, they work it. And so I think this is becoming really a 21st century police issue that may not rest solely on the shoulders of the folks in blue, but they know that they're a very important component to all of it, even if it does become that end of the line for somebody, that resources offered, and now we're talking about, we got to deal with your criminal behavior. So it's encouraging to see next generations of law enforcement officers embrace some of these concepts, and I can't wait to see what they do with it.
All right. Where are we now here? So I really wanted the chief to highlight that this can't just be an enforcement thing. We are proposing some enforcement tools that Dave's going to talk to you here about in a second, but I hope you can see that with everything that Glenn has done and kind of the approach is it's service heavy, but in balancing how to address some of the negative issues to our community, to our business community, there is the enforcement tool as kind of the other option. We've sort of covered the program that's existing. As I mentioned before, and as the chief mentioned, the hope is to potentially bring someone in full-time as the homeless response coordinator to coordinate all of this. So really that position works with all of the different departments. Those departments don't get to back out of the work. Again, it's still very active in touching each of those departments, but a lot of coordination needs to happen, and sometimes very flexible in trying to figure out a solution for a person who's needing to be connected with services or has encountered an interaction with law enforcement, or maybe we need to retool our policies because they're not working. And so all of this still continues to work, but having that full-time look at it, which is really key. This is probably the thing that you guys hear about the most. We need someone on this full time to really help drive this program and continue to bring up those resources. So let's see here. With that, just a little high level on the position. And I sent out the job spec earlier, but I just really want to focus on these two key points, which is the in the field meeting with monitoring service contractors and interacting with individuals experiencing homelessness. So this position, while there is the heavy administration side, the real intent is for them to be out there in the community, be able to respond to an individual who is, sleeping in a place that is not healthy for them, be able to pick them up and actually take them to the service provider or take them to one of the low barrier shelters and make sure that they are connected to services and get them off of, get them out of unsafe places. The second bullet point here is builds and maintains connections for shelter, housing, mental health, addiction treatment, and other services. So again, that coordination piece, not just even within the departments and within the city, but with all of the other service providers. All of the service providers are doing great work, but having that link, we've had lots of conversations with Catholic Charities about stuff that they're seeing and hearing, and so it's a really good wealth of information for us to know exactly what's happening with all those agencies, and being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I have someone who needs your services, can I go drop them off, or how do we coordinate to make this happen for this individual, is really, really key. So again, there's all kinds of other stuff that they'll have on their plate, but these are really the two key topics. The other thing that I'll say is we as staff have really hesitated in bringing a position online because we understand that it is a big ask, but we were really struggling with what that position looked like. Is it a administration policy side? Is it someone that's out in the field? What is that? How can that person be successful? And the Auburn model is the one that really showed us that you can have someone that can do both and almost has to do both. You have to be really involved in the day-to-day in order to help us to build that policy. But having it in-house also then connects it with all of the work that the departments are doing versus having someone who's a contractor who we can still coordinate, but it's different when they're able to be an employee and, interact with the police chief and the mayor. And so it is a different, I think, better experience all around. For this piece specifically, we feel like it does bring a big value to the system as a whole in taking on not only the program administration piece, but again, all of those other pieces. So with that, I will pass it off to the next piece, which is the enforcement piece. So again, program administration, having the homeless response coordinator as kind of the key and the nucleus of it all, and then the code piece to really kind of back up the enforcement side of that. So with that, I will pass it over to Dave Erickson to discuss further. I think I just have to exit out of here somehow. Yeah.
Everybody need to stretch.
Yeah, I think we'll stand up for a seventh inning. Is it baseball season?
I don't know.
Are we really in the seventh inning?
Well, no, this is the third inning stretch.
Do you know how that, your PowerPoint is there, I just have to do that, look at that on the screen.
Wish I could jump in a pool.
You can exit out of mine if you need to.
I could be like Charlie, jump in a pool.
Tell you, I just did it at lunchtime. 15 minutes, 400 yards, something like that.
You should have gone to Pioneer, my son's out there swimming.
So you swimming now?
Oh, they're out already.
Did it open today, or is it next week?
It's been open for the Pioneer
swim
kids,
team.
for the Pioneer kids.
Oh,
Last days of school, they get.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I remember that. When I went to Pioneer, I forgot about that. It was the funnest time we had. Just go to
I
the
went
pool.
towards you,
That's
I
for the
can tell you.
Pioneer kids, that's fun.
I think, that's,
That's a
or they
unicorn
might do,
position.
most thing they just maybe do it for the schools, but it's just Pioneer like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, gosh, I forgot. That's a good memory. Oh, that's funny.
one Saturday, the deal is you pull it back.
We had hot dogs and burgers at the courtyard at Orchard.
Oh, for the last day of school.
I think they have to have something.
Was our last day today?
I don't know if you can get
Tomorrow's half,
Yeah, but it's just entertainment days.
Model is
More study.
one
What
person
year
as a
were you,
director
in middle
who's
school?
going out in the field, but it sounds like they
Believe
also have people.
90 to 92?
Yeah, that's what I wonder.
just
And
92.
My mom was a
Raise
vice
a little
principal, but I
different
think she was already
than
retired.
we are, because we share
Sorry,
boundaries with
Sorry, Dave. Sorry.
Travis isn't here, so.
Let's,
counties.
You want to keep going, or
Travis who?
Counties were such
Travis who? Perfect.
still
Next time you gotta go.
Bring my gavel.
to be
Yeah.
taken on by all four
We made it.
committees.
Let's hurry up before Travis comes.
Just in time.
And the county
I understand.
typically has that position.
Our apologies, Dave.
Not with outreach.
I understand why
All right.
the city would like to be in control of that.
Ready?
All right, thank you, Dave.
Okay, so we're going to cover a couple of different code update proposals here. And so we're going to start with our camping code. So a little history for you. Any of you guys know that the city actually operated its own tenting facility down at the bottom of 5th Street, 1964 to 1970. And according to 1964 and 5, it was a great success, but they closed it in 1970 because it was not so much a success. It was by donation basis, people could pay $1 and they could camp there overnight. And so they were having issues with it, so they ended up closing it down. The picture in the bottom center is actually our family's camper at Apple Capitol in 1978, camping in Pioneer Park. So it was actually, camping was still allowed in the community even up to then. So as of right now, though, city parks are open during daylight hours only, and our existing overnight camping code is right up there on the screen for you. So overnight camping is prohibited unless you have a special event permit. And I'll show you some examples of what permitted camping looks like in the city parks. So here's a few. Upper left there, that's a bike tour group that came through. They needed a place to camp, so we filled out a permit application and they were able to camp there. Fire response team, so if we ever get a forest fire in the area, I know that rarely happens, but if we do, the fire crews will camp in the parks, and then they pay to stay there. They have shower buildings and all that stuff. And then the one on the bottom was a previous Apple Capitol swim meet. So in years past, they would camp there. One of the things that we do with the permitted camping is that we make sure that there's proper sanitation facilities, that there's proper restrooms, hand washing stations, if they need security, things like that. So it's all controlled and contained. A couple of examples of camping without permits. So there's a number of environmental and human health safety concerns, everything from fires to human waste to just regular garbage and other waste issues, as well as those things of digging into shorelines and stuff that we see with unpermitted camping. So what we would like to do is update the code, and I'm going to rely on Danielle to help if you guys have specific questions on the code. But updating the ordinance for camping provides a lot more detailed definitions. It provides tools for law enforcement to go out and actually enforce this a little bit better. And then it also addresses all those other issues that we talked about, the environmental, the health, the unpermitted things that you see there. And so later this evening, we'll ask for approval of ordinance 2024-11. And if it is passed, then that would take into effect 30 days after it's published. So we'll stop with that one before we move on to the next one, in case you have any questions on the camping side of things.
So I know a number of other cities have implemented things very similar to this, and I'm kind of curious how ours compares to what other cities have done. I believe Portland is one that has put this in place, and the difference was night and day.
Yeah, so I can answer real quick. So I know when we were looking at, and you'll see more in the next presentation, a little bit more obvious why we were looking into a number of these different things. But I looked at a variety of different cities out there to see, okay, who's doing what? And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, we bounced back to Auburn and used their ordinance as a model then for this. And I don't know, Danielle, if you want to jump in on anything on that, but.
Well, in Washington State, it's kind of all over the map on what various cities are doing. But as Laura stated, we're kind of modeling after Auburn, and Auburn's ordinance has not had a judicial challenge. So it's presumed to be valid, and so we kind of modeled it after that.
Perfect, thank you.
So what happens when the person doesn't move, doesn't take services? I guess I'm still not clear on what the
In other words,
actual,
they're camping, their approach, they don't want to leave.
yeah.
You know, I'm gonna jump in just for a second. So what's going on, I go to these encampments, and what's going on, and I've been asked not to go sometimes, but you know, the outreach right now is doing a poor job. Captain Chance went in plain clothes once, and what you hear is, would you like a Narcan or a bottle of water? That's it. There's nothing else that, you know, and to me, I care enough about people. So to even, like the enforcement, which we need to answer for, you know, what goes on, but, you know, some of these people aren't even being asked, and I don't want to be a city that just dumps, say, get out of here. That's not the right thing. We're not going to lower ourselves. We're gonna come and offer services. So like Catholic Charities contacted, I asked them to go out there, and they contacted, and the lady needed a plate. Her family's from, I think that one was from Idaho. And then result is, hand her the phone, she calls her mom, can I come back home, work it out, we make sure it's a safe place, Catholic Charities make sure it's a safe place, got the money to go out of there. So I know that's not the question, the answer, but part of this process has got to be, we got at least get there, and I think it's a start. And you're right, there's people that aren't going to do it, so I'm going to let somebody else address the actual question.
Yeah,
But
so I guess, and I'm kind of curious too, what's the teeth behind this?
Yeah.
So,
All these pieces have to work together. So you have the outreach piece, and then you have the enforcement, and then here comes the enforcement right now.
here comes the
I'll step
teeth.
aside.
So Danielle, which one of them are misdemeanors versus infraction?
So if you look here at the current code, our overnight camping is non-criminal, so it's a civil infraction. It's kind of like a speeding ticket. And the proposal for the new ordinance is to have a little bit more teeth, which it would be criminal now if a violation of our camping ordinance occurs. So if a person doesn't accept services and there is space available in a shelter, then the tool in the toolbox is criminal enforcement.
Which means,
We call up to the jail, and we ask if we can book somebody into jail, and our answer is about 75% no.
right,
Overcrowded, we have booking restrictions. Give them a citation, it goes to warrant, and even on the warrant, there is question as to whether or not an individual can be booked. So there's a broader discussion that talks about outside of parks, and we're talking about open spaces, private property. Trespassing falls under the criminal side of it.
right.
And so, you can't utilize your criminal trespassing on these locations in our city that our city owned. But when you end up, trespassing an individual, a lot of times it's that first warning and we're talking on private property. It's that first warning, document that they have been trespassed from that location. And we have repeat offenders, and that's when the criminal citation comes into play, plus possibly an arrest, plus possibly a booking.
Yeah,
But-
so let me just clarify, the current code does allow for that civil infraction, but we also have another civil action that we can take, which is an encampment cleanup. That encampment cleanup process, though, takes more time. And the criminal enforcement section would allow for immediate action to be taken. And like the chief stated, there is another avenue that you can take prior to criminal enforcement, which is the proposed ordinance also has a section in it where you can trespass them from the public space because they are not complying with our current ordinances. And that's not just because they may be unlawfully camping in a spot. The ordinance is more like a protection of public spaces. Because we're trying to protect the public spaces for everybody in the city to utilize, not just a space for no camping. Okay, so I don't want to say that this is a no camping ordinance. This is more like a protection of public spaces ordinance. Because it allows you to also trespass somebody from a public space that maybe is taking drugs in the public space, is fighting in the public space, doing other things like that.
In possession of stolen property, like a shopping cart?
Yes, so it's for any type of criminal infraction or civil infraction. So if you're not obeying the law in our public spaces, the ordinance does have a section where the police officers can then trespass that person from that public space for a certain period of time.
Is a thought that if we have this, that alone is going to be some kind of deterrent to people violating it, whereas now they know that there is no
Yeah.
option.
I think that is the hope, is that folks will recognize.
Word will get out.
Yep. And it becomes a tool to help folks make a logical decision, if they're capable of it, to not do anything with that notification. Education first, followed by enforcement. That's probably the best model.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Yeah, one of the things I also want to highlight that the ordinance does is it doesn't allow individuals to use the public space to store their property. So a lot of the issues that we are seeing are people are essentially homesteading certain parcels or certain spaces that are for the public, keeping their entire camp up for a long period of time. So this ordinance would prevent them from doing that.
Okay.
Danielle, so if they're charged, this is a misdemeanor?
Correct. So the maximum, a misdemeanor is a maximum punishment of 90 days in jail and $1,000 fine, or a $1,000 fine.
Does this include if you're, I don't know, panhandling, or you have a sign, you're at a so-and-so restaurant with all your gear in the ground, you're camping there, asking for money, does that count as camping?
No, panhandling is a protected activity by the Constitution, so it would not cover panhandling.
But they're camping because they have their stuff with them.
Okay, so maybe
Is
I
that-
misunderstood your question. If you are solely panhandling, no, that is protected activity. That is not going to be made criminal. If you are camping and there is a shelter, a low barrier shelter available, then criminal enforcement action could be taken under the ordinance.
I guess that's what we need, is the definition of when does it become I'm occupying this space to now I'm camping in this space.
So the ordinance does have a definition of camping, camp or camping. And so it means to pitch, create, use, or occupy camp facilities, which has another definition, for the purposes of habitation, living, accommodation, or dwelling, as evidenced by the storage or personal belongings in camp facilities, or the use of camp paraphernalia, or parking a trailer, camper, or other vehicle and remaining in that park location for 24 consecutive hours.
Okay, so it's not gonna cover somebody standing at a driveway entrance panhandling, because unless they're there for 24 hours, they're not really camping there. Correct?
Yes, if they're not meeting the definition of camp or camping, then this ordinance would not apply.
Thank you.
Oh, I take that back. Unless they're committing another violation in a public space, or if they are storing their camp facility, their camp items in our public space.
Okay, so the definition of storing, because is there a time period on that? Or if I just stack all my stuff up on the sidewalk but still leave enough space for somebody to get by is?
So we do have a definition of store also, which means to put aside or accumulate for use when needed, for for safekeeping to place or leave in a location. It's essentially when you are not going to be attending the items and they
It's
are
with
being
you,
stored.
then, probably not.
So as long as they took it with them when they left, they would still be able to
okay.
panhandle with their stuff. As long, but they can't block the sidewalk.
Correct.
All right.
Well, let me, with the law, it's always, it depends, right? So can they walk the side, can they walk the sidewalk? Yes, they can walk the sidewalk
walk
as
it,
long
right.
as
No, I
they,
said block.
oh, block.
Block.
Okay,
They can't
no.
block the sidewalk.
They cannot block the sidewalk. They have to allow for pedestrian traffic to flow.
Right, thank you.
Just to kind of wrap up the conversation, I think to Danielle's point, every situation is a bit nuanced, but I think what we're trying to do is these public spaces that are, it's less about, it's more about the actions that are happening with those public spaces and how the public can now access them, which is they're not being able to go there, they're not being able to go to Locomotive Park, they're not being able to go down to other places, they're not being able to use the public right of way. And so the intent of that is to say these actions cannot happen in these places, because not only is it hazardous to the people that are there, but now you are prohibiting the use of these spaces from the public. Again, those are all kinds of different situations, but we also think that the ordinance in general helps expedite the enforcement piece, because now it is just not an allowed action versus
Right.
having to go through the process of noticing this. Again, still very service heavy, and that's why Danielle keeps saying, if there is space available, right? Because we still want to make sure that, hey, you can't be here, but we have a place for you. So if there is space available, then we can go ahead and enforce that if they are still unwilling to at that point in time. But that's kind of the full intent of it, knowing that, again, there are nuances in between that in the different cases. Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
That's all right. Okay, so the next one, one of the things that we are looking at doing is try to find ways to reduce the amount of source materials that are ending up in the parks. And this is not just regular park trash. You know, you go down, you have your picnic lunch or what have you, you throw it in the trash can, you walk away. These are other random things, and sort of the main categories of things that we're finding, and I have them up on the screen: cardboard, pallets, tires, shopping carts. We find the things that are left out on curbs or things that find their way to the parks from donation centers. So you may see additional work coming forward. This one is just taking one of those pieces, the shopping carts, out and addressing that. For context, our staff hauled off over 45,000 pounds of non-park related trash just from April and May this year. And so that's the stuff that's showing up in the parks that we're having to remove each week. Effectively, it's about 2 dump trailer loads of debris. A little fun fact for you: shopping carts were invented in 1937 in Oklahoma by Sylvan Goldman of the Humpty Dumpty supermarket chain. So we recover about 5 to 6 shopping carts every single week on average. And that doesn't include those that are down in the river. We have to get a boat to be able to get those out. But there are shopping carts all along Hale Park down in the river that we know of, that we can see, but we just can't reach. I wanted to take a minute to, and I hope you can see this. So our guys have a program on their tablets, so our maintenance crew. It's called Elements. And if you look at the picture on the left, that's just a screenshot I did. All of their park areas or open space areas that we maintain is included on this tablet, right? So they can go into that happens to be the Cellar Bridge interchange, highlighted in green. So they can go into that, they can click on that when they do park maintenance. So everything from mowing to tree removal or pruning or cleaning restrooms or what have you is on there. So you can see on the middle screen, you can see that circled has park maintenance. And then they get a drop-down list of all those different things. So what we're able to do is add shopping carts to their drop-down list. And we sat down and thought, okay, let's try to make a list of every store that has shopping carts in the valley. We didn't hit all of them, but we hit a lot of the frequent ones. And so we created another tab for that. So when they're at a park, if we end up recovering a cart, they can say, oh, that one came from Office Depot, because a lot of them have identifiers on them, either on their, the handles or on the front. Some of them are molded in, like wing coats are molded in the side, so you know where they're coming from. We also have a miscellaneous or unknown section, so if we don't know where they came from, then we'll check that box. We just started this like last week, so I don't have any data on it yet, but as it's been an ongoing issue, you know, that's like 300 shopping carts a year or more that we're basically throwing away and recovering. So we have a current code. It's actually RCW 95A or 9A56 and all the other numbers behind it, which is basically it's unlawful to remove the shopping carts. You can't be in possession of it. And Danielle can help me out on this too. And it applies when the shopping cart is signed, basically, and that's a misdemeanor if you pull that stuff away. Jump in yet?
Yeah, so we've had a city ordinance in effect, like Dave said, since 2009, but we haven't been able to utilize it at all. And we haven't been able to utilize it because the businesses have not voluntarily put the required information on their carts for us to actually enforce the shopping cart theft code. And so one of the things that we are trying to do through this other ordinance is to say, okay, businesses, let's put a requirement now for you. It's been over a decade. There hasn't been voluntary compliance. Let's put a requirement now where you are now going to be required to properly sign or document your shopping cart according to the RCW so that we can enforce the ordinances that we already have in place.
And so on this next screen, you can see, again, kind of used Auburn as a model for what they have. Danielle mentioned the identification. And so now this way, we'll impound the carts. We'll notify the people, hey, we've got 15 of your shopping carts. Come on down, pick them up. Here's the date, here's the time, here's where they're located. And then there's also an impound fee as well. This helps streamline the abandonment, or sorry, excuse me, the disposal of the carts as a public nuisance. And what's the other thing I wanted to mention? One other thing. Anyway, so there would be an education component to this too. So it wouldn't be like day one, if this passes, hey, we're going out and we're gonna bill everybody for shopping cart stuff. No, there'll be an education piece where we'll reach out, contact all the business owners, say, you know, this is coming. We want you to be aware of it. We'll have at least a 30-day window at the start to be able to do that contact and outreach before it would be adopted.
Dave, I personally have contacted some places and they don't want them. And then I never understood why they didn't want them back. And you kind of gave me a little bit of explanation why. I was wondering if you could help explain that.
Yeah, some of them are pretty nasty. Just using nice terms. Some are broke. You know, they'll be broken up. Some are in okay shape. Some are covered. Maybe have feces on them. Maybe have, you know, drug residue, stuff like that. So, you know, it's harder for them to come pick them up, take them back to the store, spend the time to sanitize, clean, get them back in functioning shape than it is just for them to toss them and buy a new one.
Yeah, so one of the pictures that Dave had up there is where the shopping carts, that one, Dave, it's being used by individuals to get junk, things that have been thrown away in dumpsters from the dumpster to wherever their encampment is located. And then the city has to go and then throw it away again and clean up the encampment. So we're hoping that through this shopping cart ordinance is that it will prevent these shopping carts from being taken off of the business owner's property and be utilized to create additional work for Dave and other city crew. An encampment cleanup is a massive project between multiple departments, and it takes a significant amount of time and cost for that encampment cleanup. So we're trying to say, okay, how can the city prevent that encampment from getting to the point where it takes all of those resources And one of the factors is, let's take away the ability to use those shopping carts to gather all of that property up at the encampment. And one thing I want to highlight, this is not necessarily an ordinance to quote-unquote punish a business. This is an ordinance to allow the city to utilize an ordinance that it has already been in effect for the person that generally has the cart and is using it. But because businesses are not properly signing the cart according to the statute, we aren't able to use that tool. So I just want to make sure the city council is aware that the focus is not on the business itself. The focus is really being able to utilize a ordinance to enforce against the person that has taken the cart off of the property.
So,
Questions or anything? 'Cause I got an idea. Sorry, not now, but you can talk, this 3 minutes before the city council. This is just, you can bring it up at the city council. Thank you.
so if a business has a cart out there, we go through the education piece, and now the way it's written right now, is it an immediate fine if their cart was stolen?
If they voluntarily take action to keep the carts on their property.
You mean like, so when we're talking about that, meaning they would have to have an employee, basically?
No, like Fred Meyer.
Oh, you mean with the locks, the magnetic locks?
Yeah.
So they would have to change all their carts over to do that. I'm
But
just
right now,
trying,
the city is having its resources being used to go find all their carts and go return them, or the city's resources are being used to dispose of them. So the
right.
city has been taking on
So
that.
is it similar to if my car is stolen and it's retrieved, it becomes my responsibility to go get it, right? And if I left it where it was, it would get towed and I'd be responsible for it, right?
That is a good analogy, yeah.
And your insurance company would reimburse you if the car was totaled and damaged and it had to be towed and things like that. But a little mom and pop shop isn't gonna have insurance on their shopping carts to cover labeling them, retrieving them, or paying for them to be disposed because they don't want them back. So this is gonna be an expense on them for somebody else's action. I guess the thing I'm struggling with is what exactly is it gonna take? I mean, what kind of labeling does a cart need other than it says Walmart on the front or Safeway or whatever? What is it that's preventing us from pulling somebody over and saying, you're in possession of a stolen shopping cart because it's no longer on their property? I don't understand that part.
To use theft, I have to prove as a prosecuting attorney that they took it. And if I want to prove
they're in
possession of
possession.
stolen property, I have to prove that it's stolen. In this scenario, with the use of the theft of the shopping cart, I just have to prove, is the cart properly signed? Yes. Are they in possession of it? Yes. And I'm done.
So the properly signing, what exactly is that gonna cost them to do for every cart?
What is it? That I don't know.
Some of them.
That I don't know.
Some, when they buy, like Winkos, those are molded into the plastic on the side, so that's.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Like the Winco shopping carts, for example, which I think is the one that we pulled from under, that was abandoned under the bridge earlier this week. It's molded into the side of the shopping cart, so it says Winco and it's just stamped right into it.
So that one, because it's molded into the sides, we should have been able to take action on it if we saw somebody in possession of that cart, correct?
No, so goes to your prior question. So under RCW 9A.56.270 subsection 2, which the ordinance essentially mirrors, the cart has to identify the owner or the retailer, notify the public of the procedure to be utilized or authorized removal of the cart from the premises, notifies the public that the unauthorized removal of the cart from the premises is unlawful, and lists a telephone number or address for returning the carts that are removed. So that's what a proper signage would include.
And so now you're saying it would just have to have the store's name. Is that right?
No, she's
No.
saying
It
it's
would
still
need-
gonna
it would
have
need
to
all that.
have, it's
Yeah.
still gonna have to have his label.
And how many do not have that?
None
Of
of
the
them.
carts that you, none of them?
None of them have the label she's talking about.
No.
That, I don't know if none of them, I haven't done a survey of myself of all of the shopping carts in
I've
Wenatchee,
never
but,
seen one.
but we are not the first community to do this, okay? We are probably one of the later communities to do this. So this is not a new requirement for businesses. Auburn has this also. They said it has had a significant impact within their city. Many cities are requiring the businesses to have this, so they have this other tool that the RCW provides.
So if I'm understanding all of this correctly, you're gonna find the cart, it's labeled, it says XYZ retail store on it, and you pick it up. You're then gonna call the XYZ retail store and say, you need to come pick this up. You're not going to automatically fine them as long as they pick it up. Is that correct?
No, they're automatically getting an impound fee.
And we discussed this earlier.
Yeah, impound fee, right.
Okay.
And then they're gonna get charged an additional fee.
If they don't
If
pick,
they don't pick it
If
up,
they
then
don't
we
pick it up.
dispose of it, yeah,
Yeah.
then they get another one.
okay.
And the same guy will take another one the next day. So we
Absolutely.
don't solve the problem, we just make a punitive
But at that point, then
punitive
it's on the
amount to the
business to
store.
try and come up with options to mitigate
Or catch the guy.
or catch,
Or catch the guy.
yeah.
And I would also point out, there are mom and pop shops that have do a great job already for accounting for their shopping carts. If you go to Plaza Superjet, if you attempt
They
to
don't even
take
take it out.
a
They
shopping
make you
cart
walk
out
the
of the
groceries to the
store,
car. Yeah.
somebody goes with
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely.
And they've had that in place for, I think, ever since I came to the Valley in 98, 99.
Does ours make any differentiation on size of business, how many carts they have or anything?
No.
No, just I read that Issaquah passed similar ordinance and had like a 90% reduction in,
And I've seen large retail chains put the magnetic clamp
Mm-hmm.
on there. If the cart gets X amount of distance from the store, the wheel locks up and, but all of that costs them money
Right.
for somebody else's action. That's the part I'm having a really hard time with, is that we're punishing the wrong person and the behavior, unless we can catch them in the act, the behavior doesn't stop.
So I will say that I understand where you're coming from as the business having to implement these, but the hope is that they will no longer be stolen, which is also a cost saving to them because these carts are leaving and ending up in the public right of way, which then the taxpayers are also paying to clean up. So it's kind of a double whammy. Again, do understand that the businesses have to implement it, but it's a inventory control measure, just like theft, which again is not their fault. But the hope is that with the reduced amount of usage, both there's a minimized impact to the public and that they'll be able to keep these inventory, on site, whether it's having an employee say, no, you can't bring them out of the parking lot, or doing the wheel locks, which some of the bigger retailers already do. And as Dave mentioned, including outreach and some education at the forefront to help them get up to date, to get up to speed. It's not just an overnight thing. And to partner with the success that we've seen in other cities and how it's worked.
Yeah, one thing that I just want to reiterate is that the proper signage is required for us to take action against the person that took the shopping cart off of the property. One of the other things I want to highlight is that for the businesses, this is a non-criminal ordinance. So we're not talking about imposing any type of criminal sanction against a business. We are talking about imposing a criminal sanction against the person that's in possession of the cart, though. And that is what we want to stop is, stop and save resources so Dave's crew doesn't have to gather all these carts up,
Yeah.
doesn't have, and I cannot reiterate enough that that the carts are being used to take garbage from one spot to another spot, that the city then has to spend significant resources to clean up.
But unless we're actively looking for people with the carts and stopping them, that's gonna continue.
In terms of actively looking, I don't think you have to actively look. You just walk down the street and they are there.
Yeah.
So, again, it boggles my mind that I see a Safeway shopping cart and I can't stop that person and say, you're in possession of,
Did it come from
Part-
Wenatchee or did it come from East Wenatchee?
excuse
That's
me?
part of it, right? Like you don't know which store it came from, so you don't know which store to call and find currently.
The person is still illegally in possession of something
Right.
that was stolen.
No, I think you're presuming a fact that we don't have before us or the officer. Let me backtrack to you to a court case that happened in the early 2000s that my office was involved in, where somebody at 2 a.m. was taking a brand new, like Weber grill down Wenatchee Avenue that the officer presumed was stolen from a nearby store. The court dismissed our case because we had no evidence that the Weber grill was stolen. And the officer had no authority to go up to that person and start inquiring, stopping them and inquiring about that Weber grill that they're strolling down the street at 2 a.m. That's the same scenario with these shopping carts right now, because it's not unlawful for somebody to have that shopping cart while they are walking down the street 2 miles away from the store. That's not unlawful.
But it is because they're not allowed to take it off of the property. Somebody wasn't allowed to take it off the property.
Councilmember Huffaker, respectfully, we don't know those facts yet. You don't know those facts yet.
Okay.
But this ordinance would allow a more efficient use of what we already have in play and would allow an officer to stop that person now to inquire because there is a shopping cart that's properly signed. They are and they're off of the parking lot of the business. It would allow an officer to now inquire.
So, I like the signage, I understand the signage. I think there's a cost to the businesses, but that gives us the teeth to do something about the people that are in the possession illegally. That's step one, in my opinion, from what I understand. The only thing that I have maybe a little bit of heartburn about is this is happening to the businesses, and I feel like if we do impound them, charging a fee or asking them to come and pick them up, an impound fee is a little rough, just to come and get them out of our hair. If they are not intending to pick them up at all, charging them a processing fee, I get. We're really having to deal with it. But giving them the opportunity to come and pick them up at no charge, or a window at no charge, that if they don't pick it up after a period of time, then we can charge them, and then we charge them a processing fee after that.
Yeah.
So something in between is where I would be more comfortable. I know it's already a cost to us, we're already picking them up, we're already doing those kind of things. But a double whammy or a triple whammy kind of feels a
I would agree with
little
that.
on the thumb.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but something in between. If we pick them up, we're gonna charge you, even if you come and pick it up. I
And
don't
if
know.
the criminal removes the label,
So I have no idea, these shopping carts cost anywhere from $500 to $1,500. I don't understand when I make a phone call to Safeway directly,
Yeah.
they say, nope.
well, you heard why.
So they're not gonna pick it
Yeah.
up, they're not gonna pick it up.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, they're not gonna pick it up. There's no, and they're not gonna take it back, they're gonna cost, I heard a number like 275 to
But-
sanitize it once it goes off their park. I
St.
don't
Mark
get
might
it.
come.
Yeah,
St.
St.
Mark
Mark
might
might
run
come.
down there.
Hooked
with a
on Toys
pickup.
might come. The smaller ones might come.
So,
yeah. I don't know.
I thought we just said that they wouldn't be charged if they came and
would
picked
be
it up.
100%. If we pick a card up, we're gonna charge them $30 period.
No,
Yeah, that's.
And then if we
yeah.
destroy it,
Look right here, it says
Says it
allow
right there.
impound the cart and charge for
Impound fee
impound.
of $30.
$30.
If we pick it up, it's $30.
And
Even if
then
they
if
come and
Is
they-
that right, Dave?
Yep. So impound fee, correct. So because
we're
we're
saying
picking
is-
it up, we're taking it to the storage facility, we're calling them, we're doing all of that, we're emptying out the garbage into the dumpster so we don't attract rats. And then we're calling them, say, hey, we've got 10 of your carts here, come pick them up. And then if they don't, then it's $70 on top of that
I
to
think I would
destroy
rather
them.
see like that destruction fee higher and then no impound fee. Like the perception to me seems easier, right? Like we're not charging you to pick it up. We're already doing it, right? We're trying to do the public service and get this cleaned up. It should be a working together type of a thought process.
I have to agree with Chelsea because we're already going to make these people label them and make sure, and that's gonna have a cost for them. And when you've got, several hundred carts sitting in your parking lot, that's a cost. It's a huge cost. I don't think we should be charging them if we picked it up. We should just up that impound fee if they don't pick it up.
So part of the rationale, I understand the council's concern, but part of the rationale was we need something to have some teeth to require, to have something for the businesses that it would be a cost to, well, let me back up. I'm not being very eloquent. To require that, that sign on the cart, there needed to be some teeth behind it. So is it going to cost more to put up the sign, or is it going to cost more to pay the impound fee? So there was something, some rationale to give them a carrot to put that sign on that cart. So.
I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree and think that we need to find a different solution. Either a modified solution, as several have stated, or something different. Because I think that label could be removed or destroyed or whatever, and you're right back where you started, and we haven't solved the problem of people taking other people's possession.
One more question too. What if they don't put the label on it? Then how do we know like, if they choose not to put the label on it, what happens to the business then? We're not going to their lot, right, to their parking
You
lot.
couldn't prove it was theirs because it doesn't have a label on it.
If the label is not on it, then it could be a civil fine against the business.
And we would know it was theirs because there was some other indication of that it was theirs. It just didn't have the full identification.
Yeah,
That's what I'm just.
Yeah, I was gonna say, most of the shopping carts have some sort of label on them, right? Of what business it is. They would just have to add to that label now. So, we generally know where the shopping cart goes.
Charlie, are you the one that said when this was implemented in other cities, 90% of the carts didn't have it anymore?
Issaquah had that.
Issaquah had that, okay. So I think that's something to consider, but based on time, we need to keep going on.
All right, thanks, everybody. That's it, yep, that's it.
Oh, is that it?
Thank you, Dave.
That was the end of staff's presentation, but
Okay.
this work schedule was scheduled from 3 to 4:30. We have executive session at 4:45. The items are on the agenda for tonight, though, so there is still room for discussion for the council to either provide staff some direction or take action on it. But unless there's further questions on the program, we can probably close up if that's okay with you, Mayor.
So we can continue discussion. Danielle, I'm just curious how difficult, I'm trying to think of solutions. So if I believe people are going to pick up for the $30, but how hard is it to make it just instead of $70 when we destroy it, make it $100? I mean, where are we at on that? Is that something we can do? Does that give less bite to it, or what's your thought process there?
My thought process is that we have to coordinate our fees to be relative to how much it costs for the staff time. So our fees that we have in place here, I think they are probably under the amount of what it costs for us to do for the city. So we could probably increase the disposal fee and get rid of the impound fee.
Could you add the impound fee to the disposal fee, so if they didn't come pick it up, they got the fee for both at the same time?
That would be the $100
Yeah.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I would not be in favor of just imposing an impound fee upon those that don't pick up. So I would be in favor more of what some of the other council members have said, which is to remove the impound fee and then to increase the disposal fee.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But there's your $100, you know, you're getting both at the same if they don't come pick it up.
Yeah.
So is that an option tonight for us to do then? How would that play out? I don't know
It'd be a very long motion,
okay.
but what I could do is spend some time to tweak the ordinance before 5:15.
So,
Or wait
Or
2
five.
weeks and implement it 2 weeks later, instead of making her work so hard.
I don't mind
We've
if
been
she
picking
worked.
on her, she needs.
It'd be
Yeah.
nice to get it rolling, but it's up to her, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of a million things we gotta come up with,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So if the council's sitting
And
here
it goes
kinda
kind of hand
saying,
in hand with.
it sounded like to me like you guys, it sounded like to me that you're okay with, we just do the $100 versus the 30 and the 70. And I don't mind Danielle if she has to work really hard right now, but, I'm okay with that.
And maybe in the public's comment,
Well,
we'll get an
maybe
even
there.
better idea.
There you go.
Maybe.
But we got a few minutes, so we can go talk to Paul if you want, and
So I think
it's all 4:40.